It's very nice to be here. It's always nice to be in an Anglican church. My wife's family, my wife grew up in the Church of England. Her dad was a Church of England minister. And we got married in the church in Wales. But it's always nice to be in an Anglican church because it reminds me of one of my great humiliations, which was on our wedding day, not getting married, but in the vows. We had the old church in Wales liturgy, which said, all of my possessions I share with you. And as I said that, the whole Irish side of the wedding began to burst out laughing because they knew that I brought nothing into the marriage except a few DVDs and Man United football jerseys and an overdraft. And I felt God's provision in that moment. These are just jokes. I'm aware that I am a very privileged person, but they're also true, those illustrations. And I am very aware that in my life previously, but in my life now, the provision of God who gives us what we need. And I'm very aware through my ministry and my work, the countless others who follow Jesus and know what it means to be provided for. So I come to this harvest service with a very full heart. Harvest is a time where the church community gathers to reflect on what God has provided and to give thanks. And traditionally that might involve bringing crops or things. And I see some fruits and vegetables around the place. And we remember the ways that God provides. And so perhaps as you're here, you are remembering ways in which God has provided for you in your life, perhaps before or perhaps in this moment. At Harvest, we give thanks for creation and God's ongoing creating. Creation wasn't just something that was set in motion all those years ago when God created the world, but God continually creates, continually grows trees and plants and flowers and little babies and all of the things that are around us. And we can see God's work in creation each day. And so we give thanks for that, and we give thanks for God's sustaining grace. That if you or I have breath in our lungs, it is because God has given it to us. I come with a full heart at this harvest. I feel thankful to God. Our daughter is in the back. You might have passed her on your way in. She's 10 years old last week. She's blind. She has had 10 brain surgeries in her short life and had a complex early childhood, and it continues to be a challenge. But Kate and I can stand here and say that as her parents, we have known the provision of God in the most difficult of times. In this exact moment, actually, we are building a small bedroom for her and a disabled access bathroom. And we can only do that because last year, friends and family around Greystones gathered together and they held a concert to raise money for Alana to give her this. And through friends and family, we have felt God's provision for something we could not have provided for ourselves. And so I come to this harvest feeling grateful. So that's one thing we do at Harvest. We remember the ways God has provided, but the other part of it is we give. We practice generosity. We practice giving from what we have received from God to others. That's part of the Christian life, one where we receive and one where we give. The gospel reading this morning from Matthew, it talks about God's provision of food, clothing, and the different things that we need. Jesus says in it, the birds of the air are fed, the lilies of the field are clothed better than Solomon. Are you not worth more than them, said Jesus. And it's in that context that he says, do not worry about today or about tomorrow. I wonder, are there any professional worriers among us today? Okay, just me. All right, I'm the only one who worries here. I know Lindsay worries, my sister. Some of us worry more than others. And sometimes when someone says, don't worry or stop worrying, it's quite an annoying thing to hear. But when it's the one who also calms the seas and feeds the multitudes and gives sight to the blind who says, don't worry, it's something that we can listen to. It's easier said than done to stop worrying. Jesus also says, who can add an hour to their life by worrying? Another way that's translated is, who can add a cubit to their height which is 18 inches. And I can tell you standing here, 5'7", that all the worry in the world doesn't make you any taller. So Jesus, you got to picture this. This is the Sermon on the Mount. This is part of his very famous sermon. He's on the side of the hill in Galilee, and he's preaching to the people who do worry about food, who do worry about clothing, who do worry about their life. And he brings them assurance. But he says something really important here. He's not saying that food and clothes and those things don't matter, but he says, seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and then all these things will be given to you. Seek first the kingdom of God. What does that mean? It's not just a spiritual thing, seeking first the kingdom of God. Seeking God's kingdom is not just something that we do in here in church or in our home. Jesus announced when he was on earth that the kingdom of God is here. And when he taught his disciples to pray, he said, pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So when we seek the kingdom of God, we're not seeking for something that is far off in the future and vague, but actually we are seeking something that God says is here now. And that we can pray will come as it is in heaven. So when we seek the kingdom of God, it's not something passive where we sit there, nor is it a vague future hope, but it is about hope in the present time. And so seeking the kingdom of God first is actually a calling on the church to live in a particular way that speaks to God's good news. And so the church, living as it should, helps to feed the hungry. The church, living as it should, helps to clothe the naked, visits the lonely, welcomes the stranger and the refugee. The church, living as it should, raises its voice for children in Gaza. This is the seeking of God's kingdom in the present time. It's not an exercise done only in churches with scriptures and candles and songs and people who look like us. But seeking God's kingdom is what happens outside of these walls, in the world, in the dirt and muck of the life that we face. That's where God's hope grows and flourishes. And that's why Jesus says, seek these things first, and the rest will be given. Now, to be clear, when Jesus says, don't worry about today or tomorrow, and he says that we will have these things, that doesn't mean that we will never experience hardship or trouble, or that we will never face scarcity. But what it does mean is that in the midst of any trouble or hardship we face, we can know God's provision and faithfulness in it. In fact, this is a passage that I've read several times this year at someone's bedside who is at the end of life, as a reminder that everything we need, God knows it and can provide it. Scott mentioned that my main job is working in the humanitarian sector. So my wife and I are aid workers. That was our trade, and that's what I still do from here. And I have the privilege of working alongside churches in very difficult places. And so I work regularly with churches in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Israel, in Iraq, in Sri Lanka, in Ukraine, places that are hard and where life is difficult. And what's amazing, as I've had this chance to work with people in those places, is how they can testify to God's provision in those most difficult of times. During the most recent bombing of Lebanon by Israel over this last year, our diocese in Lebanon has opened a new church. And during the most recent bombing in Ukraine over the last 3 years, our diocese in Ukraine has opened several churches. And what that speaks to is that in the hardest of places, God continues to provide, God continues to encourage, God continues to breathe life, God continues to turn death into life, and to give people what they need. Not always a life of abundance, not always excess, but God gives us enough. Because like the bird who has food to eat, or the flowers that are clothed better than Solomon, God knows our needs and cares for us. So I want to close by encouraging us this harvest time to take a few moments to just reflect on your own life and ways in which God has perhaps provided for you or continues to provide for you through the kindness of others, through the church, maybe through your job, through your children. But take the opportunity to think of the ways that your needs have been met and to give thanks. And likewise, to take the opportunity to give to others as an outworking of our own faith. Scott, I think, will mention about what the offering is going towards today. Some of it will go to a partnership that your church has, but also some is going to go to the work that I'm involved in and will go to projects like food and medical aid in Lebanon and Ukraine and places like that. So thank you for allowing me to speak. And Scott, please come.